So, I'm so grateful to be here. It's been a marvelous time heckling my friends. Because I know they're going to do it to me. And I was speaking last, so if I didn't take advantage of it then, I had no hope. So, I'm thrilled to be here. I'm thrilled to be with you, thrilled to participate. I get to share something in the second session, or the second, whatever we're doing, the next thing.
It's a worship. We do it on Sunday mornings. It's a worship service.
It's a worship service. Good. What were you doing the rest of the week? So.
Just watching TV.
I was too, and that's as much worship as this is.
I'll be quiet now.
Yeah. So, I am a missionary kid, preacher's kid, third culture kid, firstborn, which means I had further to go than most people. Evangelical, conservative, fundamentalist. I grew up in the highlands of New Guinea. I was a year old when my parents decided to take their newborn baby and go through the process of ending up with a Stone Age tribal, cannibalistic tribe up in the highlands of New Guinea. And like I said, I was a year old. So the tribal dialect became my first real language. It's my dreaming language. It was the language that my parents took years to learn, and I picked up immediately. I was part of a missions culture at the time where basically, if you gave your all on the altar, the child was the sacrifice laid. And my generation of kids were slaughtered in the name of the gospel. I was just recently in the highlands of the Collins Highlands in Malaysia, and with 50 or 60 missionary kids from another denomination who were meeting back at the boarding school that had disrupted and damaged so many of their lives. And at the time, boarding school was the place you shuttled them off to, and if you had a missions organization where you raised your own funding, then you couldn't really get kicked off the mission field very easily because the finances were coming independently. And so if you weren't very good at being a missionary, you ended up taking care of the kids at the boarding school. And so there was a lot of difficulties. I was 6 when I was sent to boarding school. That's when I found out I was white. And it was a huge disappointment. I'm still kind of pissed about it. It does explain a number of things. So I had some great sadnesses as a child. And you have to understand, growing up in a third culture is one of the greatest privileges that a human being can experience in certain ways. There is so much wonder to it, and it embeds you with certain gifts. You have an ability to move in and out of culture really easily. One of the things that it doesn't give you is a sense of belonging, especially if you're a third culture kid. A third culture kid is, you've grown up in a culture diverse from your parents, then you move back to your parents' culture, which happened when I was 10 years old, and you don't fit there. And by the time you go back to your mission culture, you don't fit there anymore either. And so you become a global nomad in a sense. And the biggest thing is to try to find home or to try to find belonging. And unless a third culture kid can find someone to belong to, they never feel like they belong anywhere. That's why it's not about geography. So I had some great sadnesses. The issue of belonging was one of them. And if you've read Crossroads, you know that that's the centerpiece of the issue of belonging. The main character is kind of a difficult human being. He's not a likable person in Crossroads. And he is but he's a foster kid. And there's a lot of similarities in terms of displacement and looking for belonging that come out of orphan hearts and foster kids. And so one of my great sadnesses was not belonging. And my first not belonging was with my mom and dad. My dad, if I had the time, I'd tell you some of his history because it explains a lot. Nobody just comes out of a vacuum. And as much as we'd like to believe that when you pray the sinner's prayer or some other magical formula, that it immediately transitions you into perfection, it's not true. The process of salvation is a process. As much as we would like extreme soul makeover, send me to Disney World and fix me by the time I get back, it just doesn't work that way. We are too incredibly crafted for simple solutions. You're just too intricate. That is why it takes the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit to unwind the damage and to restore you to the full image of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. My sadness with my dad is immense. He didn't have a chip for being a dad. He didn't have the software. By the time I got there, years before I got there, his father had beat that to shreds, and before him, his father. So my dad grew up as a hunter-trapper in the logging camps starting at 14. He was orphaned at 12. At 14, he started working in the logging camps because he ran away from the farm that they had sent him as child labor. Basically, that's what they did with children's services back in the day. And the boys particularly, they worked on farms as child labor. One time I heard my dad overhear him say to one of his brothers, "Maybe that's why I'm so angry, because we were always on the outside looking in." That is, that they were sleeping in the barns watching the real families through the windows. Now, my dad never said that to me because he doesn't know how. He doesn't have the skill set yet. We're stumbling our way forward in our testimony, but it's an arduous journey. My dad was in the logging camps at 14, and if you know anything about logging camps, they're such embracing, kind, and tender environments. When he was 18, two of his sisters, the only two who had become followers of Jesus, probably like many of us out of desperation, drag him to a Sawdust Trail camp meeting and a revival. And my dad has a massive encounter with Jesus, so massive that he walks out of the logging camps and into Bible school, where he meets my mom. They get married. He takes a little church up in Alberta, and in 1955, I'm born in Grand Prairie, Alberta. And 10 months later, my mom, my dad, and I, we pack everything we have, and we move to the other side of the planet and become pioneer missionaries into a place where no white people had ever been. They are spirit worshiping, warring cannibals. Not for food, they did it for ritualistic reasons, but real safe place. And but I was a year old. Back in the day in missions, if you did the work of God, you would then believe that God would take care of the kids. And I was saying I met with these 50, 60 kids just not long ago in the Collins Highlands. And yes, there are some beautiful things about growing up that way. No doubt. It's always a mixed bag. You know, nothing's ever completely distorted and black, but it can be pretty dark. My two other great sadnesses were that inside the tribal culture, it was a highly sexualized culture. And so sexual abuse began for me my earliest memories are right around 5. And a lot. by the time I was 6, I was already twisted enough to be a predator. That's hard for people to imagine. And then at 6, I was shipped out to boarding school, and some of the first nights, the big boys would come and molest the little boys. And so this was a fundamental destruction of my heart. That's the shack. It is the house on the inside that people help you build. And a lot of us, we didn't get good help. So what do? I've got the great sadness of my dad, who is a rager. I didn't want anything to do with this man. He terrified me. And I had his theology that matched it. There was a God behind it. There was the darkness behind Jesus. And Jesus came to save me from God the Father. Because God the Father was willing to beat the hell out of his son in order to be right with other people. And my dad was an abusive disciplinarian. When I was young and I was growing up, I look back now and I have this defense that I tried to enact with my dad. There were two of them. One was to lie, because that maybe you could get by, without the beating. The other one, and I don't even know what the grounding of this was, but when he would come at me, and a lot of the times I didn't know why. I just knew that I had done something wrong, but it was worse than that. I would yell at him 3 words over and over and over. I'll be good. I'll be good. I'll be good. Every time I yelled that, it drove this lie deeper into my soul. You're not good. And I had a theology to match it. Not only are you not good, you're like not good. Like totally not good. And you become a survivor, The sexual abuse is hard enough. And the distance from your parents is hard enough. But there's a sense that nothing about you is actually worthy. All you are is a piece of crap. Now, thankfully, Jesus came to save me from God the Father. And he would wrap me up in his righteousness so that somehow we could slip by the austere gaze of the infinite, disapproving God. And as long as Jesus covered me with his righteousness, God the Father kind of was fooled into thinking that I was like his son. And it was like, oh, but Dad, I love him. Oh, okay, but if he does anything again, we'll beat the hell into him. 6 years old, and I lost everything that belonged. My sense of family, my sense of culture, my sense of people, my color. And now I'm surviving. I'm learning to live from the outside in. The shack is destroyed. The house of my heart, the human soul, destroyed. And so I drug a couple pieces of the shack 100 yards out from it, and I built a facade, a false self, big enough so that it would cover the shack. 2x4s, a canvas that I could paint an identity fast enough to try to meet people's expectations. And I learned to live from the outside in. And my question internally, whether it was ever conscious at that point or not, was, what do you need me to be to you? Because I can do that. Just tell me. And when I start to fail, I don't run away. I hear God call me somewhere else. Because I wouldn't want to say that I actually ran away from relationships, which is the truth. But I could wrap it up in spiritual language, because when everything below the neck has been shattered, you find a place to live in your head. And so everything becomes about mind control. Control is the big word. And religion comes along and says, man, have we got a list of things that you can do to be in control? And we go, just tell me. And so everybody was about, here are the rules. You do these things and you'll be in control. Thank God I don't have to trust anybody, as long as I know what the rules are. And so life becomes about control. You control your world, you control others that are in it. And when the addictions that are rampaging below the surface or in the shack, which is your broken heart, when they begin to percolate out and become visible, or when you do the stupidest thing and begin to let somebody in and they begin to see you and then they reject you, it reinforces again that all you are is a piece of crap. And you're grateful that Jesus has come to save you, but you hope you die soon. Because death becomes your way of salvation, as long as you can hold on long enough. But it also could be your way of damnation if you don't do it right. We got back to Canada when I was 10 years old. My father became an itinerant pastor. Went to 13 schools before I graduated high school. Graduated high school in Terrace, British Columbia, way up in northern BC, right below the Ketchikan and the Alaskan Panhandle. And I went to Bible school. I was a performer. I'm the firstborn. My sister was the savior, the rescuer of the family. It's interesting. About 2.5, 3 years ago, Debbie, my sister, and there was 4 of us. My sister came to an open table that Baxter and Brad and I have been a part of, and John McMurray. And it's a beautiful open conversation without any kind of agenda to it, or as little as possible. And so Debbie comes, and at one point she comes to me, and she says, and she's got tears running down her face. She says, "You don't even see me, do you?" I'm going like, what? Now, our relationship I kind of vacated for a number of years, trying to figure out some stuff. And she has been the sort of solid rock inside the family system. And she's saying, "You don't even see me." And I'm going like, what are you talking about? She said, "You won't even acknowledge me." And this partly goes back to, I remember I graduated early from high school, and she took my yearbook to get it signed by my friends, which was a very small group, actually, like 2. But I was hoping some others would recognize that I had been there. And when she came back, none of the inscriptions were to me. They were all to her, right? But she had felt like she was in my shadow. I'm the firstborn performer. And so she said, and then that's the only time I slapped my sister in the face, is when she gave me that book and none of the inscriptions were for me. Now, I was never an angry man, ever angry growing up until I was 38, right? Because only the righteous man is allowed to be angry. So I was just upset, sarcastic. I could hide knives inside words and smile. I could take a 300-pound man down to his knees, because one of my advantages, I'm outside the culture, and things are a little more obvious to me sometimes. And Debbie had disliked the idea of being Paul's sister. And within a year, she no longer was Paul's sister. She had her own identity. And I didn't have one yet. So I'm struggling. So she says to me, "You don't see me." And I had tried, because I didn't want her to be, now since I wrote The Shack and stuff, I didn't want her to be Paul's sister, right? And so I was kind of stepping back, but in the way she felt. And we started talking about this, and she said, "You know, when we were growing up, I saw Dad beat you. I saw it with all 3 boys, especially you. Dad never laid a hand on me. I wasn't worth enough." You see how children do not have the capacity to process what is taking place around them. We know that now, that it happens in the womb. What is going on in the family systems impacts, and this has been absolutely verified in the social sciences, that things that are going on in the womb impact the way that self-perception is for the human being. We are incredibly crafted. And our theology has given us a very low view of humanity. We think the incarnation was the mercy of God for this pitiful creation that had gone sideways. The incarnation is the highest view possible of humanity. So we all process differently. We're all in our family systems. And I'm performing, right? And it turns out, now I didn't believe this, when I walked out of my graduation, I thought in my mind, and I graduated Phi Beta Kappa summa cum laude, first in my class. And as I walked out, I thought, I fooled them. My life was an ocean of shame covered up by a thin layer of perfectionist performance. And I performed hard. It took every bit of energy to try to communicate to people that I was worthy of at least approval. But the problem was that shame is a double-edged sword. Secrets are a double-edged sword. And secrets are totally linked to shame. I am as sick as the secrets I keep. I didn't let people in the shack because that's where I stored all my secrets. That's where I hid all my addictions. That's what was all broken. So I presented the facade. I worked hard. What do you want me to be to you? Just give me some time and I'll do that. You need me to be funny, I'll be funny. You need me to be smart, I can be smart. Right? But I don't have any boundaries. I'm not going to tell you I don't have any boundaries, but those things were kind of shattered when I was little. So I'm constantly hyper-vigilant. I'm kind of always knowing where the exits are, always knowing where you can get in and out, and I'm scanning the crowd to try to figure out if I'm safe. I'm hyper-vigilant. And it takes huge amounts of energy to do that. I remember when I was first married to Kim, and she's Minnesota, North Dakota, salt of the earth, no 50 Shades of nothing, and barely black and white, And these people, big family. She has 5 sisters and 2 brothers. She and her 5 sisters are called the Force. May the Force be with you. And they love loud, they fight loud, they forgive loud, they always are interacting. There's 12 conversations going on at the same time, and I'm hypervigilant. And so for the first number of years, any family gathering, I'd disappear 15 minutes out of every hour breathing heavily in the back room trying to get my grounding because I couldn't keep track. Survival skills. They become unconscious. Ways to stay safe. Ocean of shame, covered up by a thin layer of perfectionist performance. And as soon as my inability to be perfect starts to happen, I heard God call me somewhere else. Maybe I could start over. The alternative was to do the last kind of running away, which is to give your life back to God, to kill yourself. And that was always sort of a constant companion that I kept at bay, mostly by moving. I covered it over with intellectual rationalism. When I walked out and I thought I fooled them, I didn't know I was actually smart. And I didn't know I was creative. And I didn't know that because I was smart and creative, I had a huge capacity to hide. It empowered my ability to hide. And I was good at it. I could pick up the cues. And that's how I lived, by survival. I went into university, finished an undergraduate degree 1 year at Warner Pacific College in Portland. I had actually been on my way to Los Angeles to finish up a double psychology philosophy. And I got stopped at a crossroads in Oregon. In fact, a friend of mine who's a professor, a PhD psychologist up in Canada, had said, there's a guy that I want you to meet on your way to Los Angeles. And he knew me well enough to know that I was really damaged goods, in a sense. But I was very smart. And from his perspective. And he said, there's a guy. So I end up meeting a young man, his wife, and they had a little baby. And he was very different than me. I'm an intellectual rationalist because I'd learned to live in my head, right? One of my survival skills is that I'm able to flip a conversation back on you so fast your head will spin and you will feel that you're at fault. I did that to Kim, right? When we were married. She'd walk in and she would say, I know I'm right about this, but I don't know, how did you do that? I'm walking out feeling like wrong and worthless. And I didn't know how I did it. It's a survival skill, right? Because I can't handle anybody poking through my perceived perfection down into this ocean of shame, because up it will come and you're going to get fight or flight. We human beings are incredibly crafted. The things in our lives that happen to us impact in waves, not just in our world, but in the worlds around us. So, I'm surviving. I start working for a church. Only time I ever worked for a church, East Hill Church. I went to school and I met a group of people. This guy that I met first, he used to be a warlock. Not exactly an intellectual rationalist. He had trained 24 witches, and after he became a Jesus follower, he went back and helped 23 of them to come into relationship with Jesus. So this is a guy that goes down to the corner of such and such and talks to the angel down there. Right? Now, I'm not the spiritual reality is not unknown to me. I grew up in the highlands of New Guinea in a spirit-worshiping, warring, cannibalistic tribe, right? So it's not like it's unusual to me, but I don't have that kind of connection with the invisible. And he read my mail. And that was the beginning of staying in the Oregon area. So I graduate. I work for East Hill Church for 2.5 years, and I'm in charge of the college career group, the 20s to 30s, and it is the thing in Portland. It becomes the thing in Portland. We had anywhere from 300 to 700 kids, and I'm 23, right? And And so I'm a performer, I told you. That's where I go to hide. And one night, I'm in charge of a Friday night, and in walks Kim for the first time with 2 of her 5 sisters. And I spot her. And I immediately changed what we're planning to do so that we could break up into groups of 2 and pray for each other. Power corrupts. That's how I met Kim. And we became friends. Didn't date. I mean, after a few months, she had left her car over at the parking lot at East Hill Church, and it's crossed 2 double lanes with a center turning lane from the area that she lived. And I volunteered to go and run over there, like physically jog over there, pick up her car, and bring it to her. And because, I'm in my 20s, and I'm 5'6", so I've got to do other things to compete in the market, and so I'm physically exercising and stuff like that. So I'm on my way to pick up her car, and I got hit by a 16-year-old high-risk driver doing 55 miles an hour in a center turning lane in the middle of that road. And I got knocked a half a block. And I land in a heap in front of the pastor's house as he's walking out the door to get in the car to go to the airport to go on a speaking engagement. And he's an ex-EMT. And he is on me instantly, Jerry Cook, and Foursquare Church. And I grew up CMA, which is like the odd stepsister of the Foursquare. They both came out of the holiness movement. We decided that it was about sanctification. They decided it was about baptizing in the Holy Spirit. So we never talked for like 100 years. And they had the Foursquare gospel. We had the fourfold gospel, but we disagreed about half a sentence, and it was enough to go. So in my rebellion, I kind of went over to the Foursquare. But Jerry Cook was the first charismatic Pentecostal person I'd ever met that I thought was intelligent. And so told you, I lived in my head and I was kind of an ass. Oh, I'm sorry, I know people get upset. That's an Old Testament quote. It means a donkey. God has spoken to me and used that word, just so you know, and he didn't mean donkey. So take it up with God. You got a problem. All right, so she and I became friends. Kim and I became friends. And I've been told that during this time, before the accident, that I was interested in Cheryl, this other girl. I guess really interested. The reason that I don't know is that when the accident happened, and Jerry is out there, within like 2 minutes, an off-duty ambulance happened to be coming one direction and 2 off-duty police officers another direction. And they all converged. And they told me later that I never lost consciousness, but I was loopy, and I don't know, it's a technical term, but it means I was in a cerebral cycle. That is, I would say, and I was really wrecked, right? So I would say, so what happened? And they would say, well, Paul, you were in a really serious accident. You were hit by a car, and we're getting you ready to take you to the hospital, and you've been really hurt. Oh, so what happened? Right? Like over and over and over for like 24 hours. They said that they had to do surgery, but because of the head injuries, they couldn't give me anesthetic, so I screamed through the process. They had to reset bones and all kinds of stuff. And when I came to conscious awareness a day or so later, or the first time I have a memory of, because this all was gone, right? So my first conscious awareness memory is I'm throwing up, and the nurse says, you might be allergic to Demerol. You did the same thing when we gave it to you downstairs. You want to give me some more? We can make sure. For real? And then it dawns on me. I don't know who I am. I don't know where I am. I don't know what year I am. I don't know what country this is. I don't know how I got here. I know what a bed is. That's a good thing. I know what it looks like I'm in a hospital, but I don't know what country I'm in. And I don't know what year it is. And I don't know anything about who I am. And I didn't know anybody. I had complete amnesia complete relational amnesia except for one relationship. I knew Jesus loved me. That's the only relationship that was in the middle of this. And as soon as I realized Jesus loves me, I was good. And not only good, I was incredible in the sense that I had no baggage. And for the next week or so, I had the greatest degree of peace I had ever experienced in my life. Because I had no hypervigilance, I had no agenda, there was just nothing that I had to be worried about. I had no reputation, I had nothing. Kim comes to visit me because I've been going to get her car, and so she comes and she walks in the room and she bursts into tears and runs out because I am a wreck. And my thought is, wow, she's cute. Wonder who she is. Slowly over the next few days, chunks of memories start coming back. And with it came the baggage. Some things never came back. Cheryl never came back, which really pissed her off. What are you going to do? I have one, and it took a while, but I got one little memory sitting in a car talking to her. She's great. But she thought we had something, and it was gone. And I didn't, and so she got mad and married this guy about 8 months later. And so here I am, I'm in a wreck, I'm trying to recollect my memories, and literally some of them never came back. But chunks would come back, big pieces. And so I went on a trip up to Canada, and on that trip, I hear God speak to my heart. Now, I've never heard God speak audibly, and I've got friends who have, and I totally believe in that, and I don't have a problem with it. I think God doesn't speak to me audibly out of spite. I just, it's because I used to make that if you just would speak to me, then I'll actually believe, that kind of stuff, It's like, I'm going to teach you how to listen to me in other ways, So we're going to be more subtle. And frankly, I don't need God to speak to me audibly. If God does, it's great. But I know the voice. I've learned to know the voice that's on the inside. And that voice often tells me things that I wouldn't say, right? And you can, if you read my stuff, you see how conversational that is. That's kind of how it works for me. And it's very unique. That's my language, that kind of stuff. I think that God speaks to us so normally to us and in our own language to such a degree that we don't recognize it. Because we're looking for somebody else's experience and language to validate our relationship with God. And it's God who knows how to learn other languages. That's the whole Old Testament right there in a nutshell, right? Us who don't know how to speak God's language, so God comes and speaks ours. You got a language of sacrifice? All right, I hate sacrifice. But you speak that language, I'm going to come and we're going to find a way to talk to you inside that language. And at some point along your journey, when you've got all this sacrifice crap going on, I'm going to have your prophets stand up and tell you, God hates sacrifice. And you're going to go, hey, I just need one more. Just give me just one. If we can just get a really good one, and God's going to, I'm going to submit to that too. Just we'll just work this out, and I'm going to be the one good sacrifice, and then it's going to be done. This is a God who knows we can't speak his language, so comes to us in our language. And that's part of the beauty of Scripture. And that's why we have a problem with it. Because we're always going like, well, I think God is like that. God's going, gee, really? Okay, let me see how I can work with this, And that you get that kind of mystery and movement in Scripture. So here I am, I'm busted up, my memory's coming back, I take a trip to Canada, and I think I hear God say to me, contrary to what I've been saying for a number of years. What I've been saying is, I think I'm going to stay single and just work for the Lord. And you know why you say that, because you don't want anybody in, right? Now you can make it sound all holy and righteous and stuff, but it's just a crock, right? It's just like saying, yeah, I don't run away from relationships, I just hear God call me somewhere else. It's just completely BS. Or like saying, well, I didn't want to tell my wife that because I didn't want her to worry. Like, come on, really? What kind of nonsense is that? But we are so good at it. And so, but I hear God say, marry Kim. And I think, that's a good idea. Wonder how I should ask her. We haven't even really dated. So I figured if I asked her in a group setting, it would be safer. Men are stupid. All right, okay. So when I got back from that trip, I gathered together 15 of my closest friends, including Kim, and I made beautiful cards for them because it turns out that I'm kind of creative. So they were very special, and we sat in a circle, and I mixed up the cards, but I kind of palmed Kim's to the bottom because hers just said, will you marry me? And I'm figuring once she opens that card, the whole evening's going to go one way or the other. And so the rule was you had to open your card and read it out loud without pre-reading it. So I would just hand... I already told you, right? So it gets to Kim. She's the last person, and people, they've been touched by whatever. I don't know. She opens up her card, and she reads, "Dear Kim, will you?" If she was standing here today, she would tell you that what went through her mind that moment was, if I say no, he's going to never ask me again. But if I say yes, I can back out. Don't you love this woman? Right? So she said yes. And we were married 11 days later. What? I wouldn't made it 12. Because as soon as she said yes, I started freaking out. Now, she didn't know I was freaking out because this is all about creating a facade that you can paint as fast as you can pick up people's expectations, right? So I'm always like taking in this information and creating a false self. Now, I don't think it's a false self because here's the idea. I am so embarrassed about the worthlessness of the shack of my own heart that I've created something that I'm trying to work at to win the affection and the approval of somebody. God even. And so I'm hoping if I can just do this right, someday this facade would become a real boy. Because the real boy has got all these issues and addictions and secrets. And Kim says yes, and I suddenly realize I can't maintain this facade, or maybe I can and not let her in. But I can't run the way I could have. And I was immediately suicidal. On our wedding day, I ran a temp of about 103, 104, and I don't think I was sick. I think all of this turmoil had come to this space now. And Kim just, she loved me. She didn't know me. She thought she knew me. Because I presented really well. I got past her crap detector, her mom's crap detector, and these are Minnesota, North Dakota folks. That tells you how skilled a deceptive person I am. Now, I would never have acknowledged that I was. You know, there are so many pieces that are wrapped into all this kind of damage. Secrets. We are as sick as the secrets we keep. And here was my dilemma. I couldn't tell anybody my secrets. Why? Because I couldn't take the risk that I would see in their eyes the same disgust that I had when I looked in the mirror. I couldn't take that. But I needed affection and I needed approval, and so I worked for it. And it was like scrabbling together these little bits and pieces of light to try to keep myself alive. And I worked hard at it. But I couldn't let you in. I couldn't tell you my secrets. And here's how secrets absolutely trap us. I can't tell you my secrets because you will hate me the way I do. But I need your affection and approval. But when you give it to me, the very things that keep me alive, I don't really believe you. Because you don't know my secrets. If you knew my secrets, you wouldn't be so impressed. If you knew my secrets, you wouldn't think that I'm a good guy. If you knew so I'm absolutely trapped. I can't tell you. But when you give me the things that I need to survive, I don't believe you. That's why I walked out of my graduation, Phi Beta Kappa, summa cum laude, and my first thought was, I fooled them. I didn't think that I was actually smart or actually creative. And you're in turmoil, so you just cover it up, you disassociate, you perform, you do your thing. And I found a way inside the early stages of our wedding, marriage, to disassociate enough to get control of it and adapt. And I became a good father. I read the books. Turns out I'm smart, so I can read stuff and assimilate information. I never did know at this time how to love anybody because that just wasn't in my tool chest. It just wasn't in my personhood. So I didn't love people, but I'd read the books about it, so I knew what it looked like. And I could perform it really well. But I couldn't let anybody in to see my addictions because I just couldn't. I became a good father, a good husband. I was in business. I was teaching on the side. But my head was still completely separated from my heart. My heart was broken. Very intellectual rationalist. Sometimes there is this element of shame-based arrogance or insecurity-based arrogance that comes with being smart, that becomes our refuge and our prison. And a lot of our prisons are prisons of choice. And we stay there because it's what we mostly know. Freedom scares us. So I adapted. I managed to deal, but there were things about Kim that just like, here's one of the things that I learned, and this is incredibly powerful. And I didn't learn it in this. I had to learn it when I was going through therapy a bunch of years later. Shame will destroy your ability to distinguish between a value statement and an observation. Shame. See, guilt is I've done something wrong. Shame is I am something wrong. Guilt is legit. Shame's not. But if you begin with a theology that tells you that you are something wrong, good luck dealing with shame. That's why Brad or Robin or Baxter, somebody was talking about being, I think it was Brad, being covered over by the imputed righteousness of Jesus, hoping that God doesn't see what you really are, because you're a worthless, depraved human being. But shame will destroy your ability to distinguish between a value statement and an observation. Let me give you an example. Kim was really good at this. See, I had this thin layer of perfectionist performance that I was trying to keep together, right? She kept poking her finger right down through it, right? She would say these horrible things to me like, Paul, don't mix the colors with the whites. Yeah, can you believe that? Yeah, now she's talking about laundry, right? What did I hear her say? I don't know why I married such a loser of a human being as you. Because shame destroys your ability to distinguish between an observation, which she was making, and a value statement, which I heard, because she tapped through a point of imperfection. I didn't do laundry right, and boom, up come fight or flight responses. And that's when I could spin a conversation back on her so fast she didn't know what hit her. And it would somehow be her fault. Survival techniques. You know, you go through these stages when you're trying to deal with and I'm still pursuing God, right? All the time I've been saying, God, please heal me. I just don't want anybody else to find out that you did, right? Right? Please, don't tell anybody, but fix me, please, you know? And so you don't let anybody in because you just can't. And so in the adapting side of the marriage, about 6 weeks into our marriage, I went hunting with a bunch of guys. Vice cop and a butcher. Butcher is great to go hunting with, by the way. And I come back home, and I'm in one of these cycles where I'm determined to tell the truth, right? Because you go through these things where you're trying to use self-discipline to become a better person, you know? And so you're in the middle of this cycle, and at this point, I just want to be honest. It's like, I'm going to start from now going forward. See, then we don't have to deal with any of this other stuff and all the things that I've already, lied about and stuff. We don't have to worry about that. If I can just recommit myself to this point going forward, then I'm going to be honest. You know those cycles, right? That way we'll never have to talk about that. And old things have passed away, all things become new. So that's got a verse for it, all right? So now, okay. And then Kim has to ask me this really brutal question. I come back from hunting and she says, so did you miss me? Shoot. Okay, here we go. No. She goes, what? Kim, I don't have a misser. I don't. I was pulled, and didn't say this, but it's true. I was pulled out of the tribe. I went to boarding school, been to 13 schools. I know how to leave. My misser was smashed a long time ago. I don't have a misser. If I said, Kim, and I did say this, if I knew how to miss you, I would do it. But I don't know how to do that. Everything's always been a goodbye waiting to happen. Well, it really pleased her. Now, Kim's an emotional processor. I'm an intellectual, rational processor. My dad was a rager. So when Kim is emotionally processing, I'm suicidal. Because the whole universe is my fault. And it's taken me years to the place where Kim emotionally processes something, And I know now she's not asking for advice. And she's probably told me 150 times, if I want your advice, I will ask for it. I don't want your advice. I just want you here. Right? And then she emotionally processes, and then she's fine. And I'm kind of like looking for a gun. The inside turmoil world that we have. Well, I adapt. I do a good job. I become a good father and a good husband because I read the books and I'm good at picking up information and then, making it look like it actually comes from my heart. Now, I don't know about all this division and all this crap, but I do know the addictions are still going on. Now, I do cover them up with self-discipline for good chunks of time. But self-discipline is a work of the flesh, not a fruit of the Spirit. So it's just, you're going to run out of energy to keep giving it enough to sustain it. And so, I'd crash and burn, but nobody would know. Well, when I wrote The Shack years later, Mackenzie spends a weekend in it. That weekend represents 11 years of my life. And I've always been a writer, and Kim had asked me over the years, would you write something for the kids? For a few years she'd been saying, as a gift, that puts in one place how you think. And that's what I did. I wrote The Shack on the train to one of my 3 jobs, trying to get it done for Christmas as a gift for the kids. And so I get a phone call. I'm 38 years old. Matthew has been born, who is our 6th child. I'm 38. I get a phone call. It's one sentence, and it's Kim. And I'd created this facade. The facade is designed so that if we can just do this right, I can win the approval and the affection that's necessary for me to keep going. The shack's still there. But I think God hates the shack, and if anybody else found out about it, they'd hate it too. Because I do. I get a one-sentence phone call. January 4th, 2 p.m. I'm at Vietnamese food with Steve Anderson on 82nd Avenue in Portland. Kim says one thing. I'm waiting for you at your office, and I know. Some of us are so messed up, broken, that it's almost an impossibility for us to finally get to the place where we recognize how messed up we are and look for help. People thought I was arrogant, and I sure came across that way, but arrogant can have a root of pride or a root of shame, and it looks the same. People who are prideful think that they are all that in a bag of chips. They think they're just better than you. People who are riddled with shame think that they are worthless, and they're trying to find a place to stand. I am waiting for you at your office, and I know. And immediately, in that moment, my facade came crashing down. Because what Kim knew was I was in a 3-month affair with one of her best friends. And it was, let me say it this way. There is justification for divorce. There is no justification for adultery. None. I thought in this 3-month period of time, it got so distorted because when you have a facade, and mine was defined with spirituality and religious content, when you have that and you are trying to protect it and you are involved in activities that are absolutely contrary, you have to almost lose your mind to try to justify your actions. And I had gotten to the point where I thought that God was behind the affair. And I thought Kim was going to die. And I had gone out and bought new wedding rings. Let me tell you, this was really sick. And in that phone call, it was like, and I'd already been struggling to some degree, trying to disassociate myself from this. But in that call, it was like the facade came crashing down. And I saw it. And I had to make a decision. Do I face Kim or kill myself? Because I was tired of running. I was tired of running internally. I was tired of running. Suicide for a lot of us, it is the last option before hitting the bottom. It is a way to run. I still don't know, and Baxter's heard me say this a bunch of times, I still don't know how I made it across town. I don't know, because I was on the other side of town. I don't have a memory of that. I remember driving into the driveway of the business and walking in to face Kim, and Kim had already physically dismantled the office. And then she lit into me. Did I tell you that I married the wrath of God? Did I mention that? In my experience, I learned that the wrath of God is the love of God. But let's not be some idealistic like, oh, the fire of God, he's a consuming fire, what a nice thought. No, he's a consuming fire. Like anything that is not of love's kind will not survive. God's intention is not just to heal you, but to destroy anything that is broken. He loves you that much. Well, Kim at the moment, she wouldn't tell you that she loved me that much, right? But she lit into me for about 4 hours before I said anything. Shame has been my constant companion my entire life, and shame has been linked to secrets. And about 4 hours into this, and I couldn't look up because shame will drive your face to the ground. I think this is partly why the early church refused to close their eyes and bow their heads when they prayed. Because they were making a declaration that we are face to face. I'm not going to let brokenness drive my eyes to the ground. But let me tell you, shame will drive your eyes to the ground. And 4 hours into this, I finally said, Kim, if we're going to do this, I need to tell you every secret I have. And naively, she said, bring it on. And over the next 4 days, I told Kim every secret I had, and she wanted to know every detail about everything. And I told her. And 4 days later, Kim was destroyed. Everything she thought was real and true had been absolutely disintegrated. And she said to me, I will not believe another word that comes out of your mouth the rest of your life. And I believed her. She didn't kick me out. But it took 11 years for her and I to heal. Incrementally, gradually. See, forgiveness is one thing. Reconciliation, that's a whole different thing. Forgiveness is between you and God. Reconciliation is rebuilding trust with another human being. And it took Kim and I 11 years, something I didn't think was even possible. When you're in a situation like that, you have to find a way to let go of control, because control has been your mantra, right? I'm a religious kid. Control is so much more inviting and acceptable than trusting. I didn't trust anybody. Thank God he gave us a religion that we could just learn the rules and try to perform up to, right? We don't have to trust him that way. And we'll substitute performance for trust every day, especially for those of us who are so broken. Kim let me stay in the house. We were having this conversation a couple Christmases ago with Matthew, our youngest, who's now 23. And his mom says, Kim says, "Why do you think that I let Dad stay in the house?" And he said, "Well, you didn't want us to grow up without a father." And she said, "Yeah, that's true, but that's not the core reason. The core reason is because, as furious as I was, he owned it. And I did." When you hit the bottom, when you really hit the bottom, you no longer point fingers. You no longer suggest that it's somebody else's fault. You don't just look at your own abuse history and justify the choices that you've made. You own it. And I owned it. And I let go of control. How? I walked over and picked up the yellow pages. They used to have these big books, And I open it to C for counselor. Counseling. And I start with the A's. And I work my way down through the A's until I get to Agape Youth and Family Services, specializing in sexual abuse histories. And Kim didn't ask me to do this. And I call up total strangers, and as a fundamentalist evangelical preacher's kid, I'm doing something when I was growing up was considered to be borderline demonic. And I call up and I make an appointment, and I go in, and Byron Kaler, who is the owner, operator, the head counselor, does the intake on me, and he says, "I think I got the guy for you. But you can see for yourself, and if it doesn't work, we'll look for another option." But he introduces me to Scott Mitchell. And Scott Mitchell becomes my therapist and becomes my friend. And I sit in front of Scott that first day, and I say, "Scott, my life is over." And then for the first time in my life, I said, "Can you help me?" First time in my life, I asked somebody to help me. And Scott says, "Yeah, I can." I said, "Scott, I don't need somebody to ask me how I feel about this. What I need to know is, can you get me from A to Z?" And he said, "Yeah, I can, but it's going to take 1.5 years." I said, "I'm in." He laughed. He said, "Paul, everybody says they're in. When they're sitting where you are, everybody says they're in. But after a couple months, they feel a little more in control, a little better about themselves, and they bail out right before the really hard stuff." But this was life or death, and I'd hit the bottom. And I said, "Scott, I don't even trust myself to know when I'm done. I'm not leaving until you tell me I'm done." I hit the bottom. He said, "Good." So we started working. And it was really hard. And every day Kim's on me. How can a human being do this to another human being? Weren't you thinking about your kids? Weren't you thinking about their kids? This is a married woman with 8 children. Their kids and our kids were best of friends. And I'd blown up this entire world. She was pounding me. Part of what saved my life was the intensity of her fury. It pushed me to deal with every piece that was hidden, every piece of garbage, every lie. And I'm working this out. So I'm working with Scott. And every day I would call Kim, because I'm still at home, but there are no secrets. We didn't make the adultery the new secret, not the family secret. Her family now knows, everybody knows. Our two oldest kids walked through with us, with this, right? All of this. Took me a number of years to tell the other four, but I'm the one that told them. And part of the miracle and the kindness of God is that in a world and community who all knew what I had done, all of my children heard it first from me. And that wasn't an easy process either. Kim's dad lived with us 17 years, was living with us during this time. He'd been widowed. Kim's mom died at 59. We had this massive 6-month period where 3 months before Kim's mom died, unexpectedly, massive coronary, and when she went in for gallbladder surgery. My 18-year-old brother was killed 3 months before this, and 3 months after this, my 5-year-old niece was killed the day after her 5th birthday. Lots of losses. Every day, Kim's going like, how could you do this? Just pounding on me. I call her up. This is what Scott and I worked on today. Every day she said the same thing. Yeah, right, whatever. You see, one of the most beautiful places that I had ever come to was the realization that I could not heal myself. And why, if I couldn't heal myself, would I have the arrogance to think that I could heal Kim? It was grace that I was allowed to even stay in the household. And I had no right to declare a timeline for her ever to deal with it. I was the perpetrator. And I thought, she's never going to recover. And this is the way it's going to be. I'm just going to do the next right thing, the next right step. And she is never going to believe a thing that comes out of my mouth and or any healing that happens. And why should she? I obliterated the bridge of trust. And reconciliation is about rebuilding it. But the perpetrator has no rights to put a timeline or to even expect it. If it happens, it is grace. So I worked hard. One day, Scott and I have been working on something, and I am wrecked because on my way home, for the first time in my life, I realize I have an internal boundary. Now, a lot of you don't understand that because you have them. If you've been in a safe place growing up with family structures that are good and encouraging and safe, you have boundaries. Those of us who've been through sexual abuse and things like that, those boundaries get obliterated, and so we become hypervigilant. We have to pick up everybody else's boundaries around us in order to maintain a sense of safety. And if we run into somebody who also has no boundaries, all hell breaks loose. So I am in the car bawling, talking to Kim, and I'm saying, for the first time in my life, I've got a boundary, something on the inside that could say no. And Kim says, yeah, right, whatever. And that's okay. It's okay. Can't heal or fix her. It gets really hard. I won't go into that part. Scott was right. The really hard stuff did show up. I almost made a trip to Mexico City because I got to the place where the last good thing that Paul Young could do was to kill himself far enough away that his children wouldn't find his body. Because I got to the place where Kim had pushed me to the edge of the abyss, and I'm looking down at this thing, and I'm thinking like, I have no idea if there's one thing about me that's actually real. That's not a survival mechanism or a safety skill. And in that moment, I lost all my hope. And I started planning that trip to Mexico City. Everything settled down. And two friends showed up unbeknownst to each other. One came to Kim and said, Kim, he's a broken boy like me, except in a different way, but he never hid it. And he says, Kim, I don't know what to tell you. I'm surely not here to tell you that you need to forgive him. But I think Paul's doing the best right now, and I think if you hit him one more time right now, you're going to kill him. And Kim listened to Kenny and backed off. And Kitty, a friend of ours, came to me and said, where are you right now? And I described being pummeled to the edge of this cliff and spun around by Kim saying, look. And I looked down and I'm thinking like, and I say to her, you know what? Pardon the language for you sensitive folks. I said, Kitty, all I am is a pile of dried up shit. And the wind's blowing and I'm terrified that when it's done, there's going to be nothing left. And Kitty says, Paul, there's a seed in there. A seed? I'm thinking, a seed. And then I think, you know what? If there was just, I didn't care. If there was a seed there, and even if I couldn't see it, if there was a seed there, something actually living could grow. And then I think, you know, seeds, they grow good in this kind of stuff. All my hope came back in a little tiny seed. And I canceled the trip to Mexico City. 9 months into my relationship with Scott, he says, you're done. I said, what? He said, Paul, you have no idea. We've never had anybody work this hard and stick with it. And it's because it was life or death for me. I wasn't trying to get well so that it would save my marriage. I wasn't trying to fix Kim. I had to find a way to change. This is a God who climbs into the messes that we bring to the table, submits to it, and joins us in it to grow something. Years later, Kim's been asking me to write something because she likes what I write. My friends like what I write. Write something as a gift for our kids for, put in one place how you think because you think outside the box. And I didn't do it for about 4 years. And then the year I turned 50, we had nothing. I was working 3 jobs. Kim was working at the high school bakery. We were living in a little rental house about 900 square feet. And joy had become a constant companion. We learned that the opposite of more is enough. We had enough. And I finally feel healthy enough to write something, which Kim later thinks was supposed to be 4 to 6 pages. And on the train to one of my jobs, I write The Shack. At Christmas, I make 15 copies. Got a little money at Christmas, made 15 copies at Office Depot. 6 went to the kids. Kim got a copy, and the leftovers I gave to my friends, and I went back to work. I'm trying to say, look, I want to tell you about the God who actually showed up and healed my heart, not the God I grew up with. And Papa, as a large black African-American woman, is about as far away from Gandalf with a bad attitude as I could get. My friends start giving it away, and that starts this whole unbelievable God sense of humor kind of thing. 2 things really important. The first 15 copies I made at Office Depot did everything I ever wanted that book to do. Ever. All of this, I don't understand it, and I don't need it. The second thing, everything that matters to me was in place before I wrote the book. Identity, worth, value, significance, security, meaning, purpose, destiny, community, love. The book has added none of that to me. My friends would tell you, Kim would tell you, my kids would tell you that of all of this, the public thing, the platform thing, which I kind of resist as much as I can, all of this, if it all went away tomorrow, I'd be great. I know how to clean toilets. It's one of my 3 jobs when I wrote The Shack. I'm good at it. When you find out that your significance is who you are, you can do anything. All this I poured out in a story to my kids. Took them a while to read it. Thanks, Dad, a book for Christmas. We'll get right on that. How do you turn it on? But they did. We have a God who is good all the time. It took me 50 years to believe it, because I didn't grow up with a God who is trustworthy. When Mackenzie goes back to the shack and he just explodes and destroys it with his chair that he rips apart, and he finally says, I hate you, and I'm done. He was waiting for the God that I grew up with, who doesn't exist. And he goes up with his fist raised again, this time to knock at this door of this place that has been changed, which is his shack. From within it, before he has repented and confessed, comes out the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, who he does not recognize, but they know him. And he gets wrapped up in an embrace of relentless affection that he fights tooth and nail as they love him into healing. It took me 50 years to finally become a child, and it took me 50 years to believe that God is good, and 50 years to trust him. And I look back, and not one time did he not have his arm around me going like, yeah, I know he's a piece of work, but he's my piece of work. A God who is good all the time, who climbs into the details of our experience, a consuming fire, which is his relentless affection, who will not rest until all that is not of love's kind has been fully restored, to the praise of his glory. Amen. So before I wrote The Shack, we're sitting in a group of friends. Kim's there. It's now about 12, 13 years from January 4th, 94. Everybody knew. And Kim says in front of me, I never thought I would ever say this. People would come to me and they'd say, you need to forgive. And what saved Kim, by the way, was her best friend, Mary Kay, who walked with her every day for 2 years and let Kim scream and cuss and so that she wouldn't kill me when she got home. And never once did she say, well, you need to get past this. And Kim says in this small group, friends who all knew my history, because it wasn't a secret, she said, I never thought I'd ever say this. It was all worth it. She's not justifying betrayal or adultery. She's not washing it over. She's making a declaration. This is called reconciliation. This is called justice. Justice is not punishment. It's when the broken gets healed. And what Kim was saying was, there is nothing so lost that God doesn't know where it is. Or there is nothing so broken that he doesn't know how to heal it. Or something so dead that he can't grow something living in it. And she was saying, he is worth it. That does not originate in her. That originates in the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and is the declaration for each of us. It took me so long to find out that God does not love the facade or the false self as much as I was trying to win his affection by it. God loved the shack the entire time and had never abandoned or forsaken it. And when I finally went back into that place, the center of my losses, God was there, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And she wrapped her arms around me and spun me around and said, it is so good to see you here. Come on. The best is yet to come.